We are switching our focus now to fractions, and I want us to think about what a fraction is, okay? And a fraction really is part of a whole. So fractions are part of a whole. So if we think about the fraction 2/3, it is missing one part to make it whole. It's missing 1/3 that then is going to make it whole. And you probably remember back from elementary school when you talked about fractions, and you know, you have your pizzas and maybe you fill in one and that would represent 1/4. But we're going to move beyond that and really focus on operations with fractions. Another question I want you to think about is where you see fractions in real life. You're going to see them with recipes, measurement. If you ever do a remodeling project on a house or things like that, you always have to take into consideration all those measurements and things like that. There's lots of other places that you're going to see fractions as well. We're going to start off reviewing how we order fractions. And when I order, I like to think of our big landmarks. So you know, we have maybe zeros here, because we're not working with any negatives if you see there. We have 0, we're going to have 1 whole here, because I don't see any that are above. Think about landmark fractions. Think about, you know that 1/2 is a landmark. So I'm going to cross that one off, I'm going to put that halfway between. I know that's a landmark. Now, let's identify which ones are going to be in between 0 and 1/2. Okay, well, 7/8, I know it's going to be greater than a half because half of 8 is 4. So 7 is bigger than that, so that's going to be above. 2/3, half of 3 is 1.5. That's a 2, that's going to be above. 1/4, oh, half of 4 is 2, that would be 1/2. So that's going to go, and I know that 1/4 is halfway between 0 and a half, so I'm going to mark that in. 3/5, well, half of 5 is 2.5. Well, that's 3, so that's above. 3/4, oh, I know 1/4 is here. That's 2/4, that's going to be 3/4 right about here. And I'm left with 1/16. Think about where 1/16 is going to go. I know that's less than a half, 8/16 would be. Now I need to figure out, it's going to be somewhere in here, but is it going to be in between 0 and a 4th, or between a 4th and a 12th? Or sorry, 1/2, not a 12th. 1/16 is going to be way at the beginning. It's missing 15 pieces to get to that whole. Now we have 3 left. I have 7/8, 2/3, and 3/5. Well, 7/8 is only 1/8 away from its whole, so I know that's going to be really close to 1. Then I have 2/3 and I have 3/5. How can I compare those two to figure out which one is greater? One easy thing that we can do is we can create what's called equivalent fractions, which is going to be what we get to next. Equivalent fractions really just means that they are the same. It's kind of like those name boxes that you did in everyday math, where you have the number 54 and you have to name it a bunch of different ways. You could name it 6 times 9, you could name it 50 plus 4, you could name it 60 minus 6, so all sorts of ways. So how can I rewrite 2/3 and 3/5 so I'm comparing them out of the same whole? And that's where I'm going to need to have common denominators. And I know you've talked about this before. What's going to be my common denominator between 3 and 5? Remember, the denominators are that bottom number. So the common number between 3 and 5, that's going to be 15. Then you play the game, how do you go from 3 to 15? Oh, you multiply by 5, same thing up top. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. It's going to be 10/15. Right here, 5 to 15, that's going to be times 3. Times 3, that's 9. So which one is bigger? 10/15 is greater than 9/15, so 2/3 is going to be bigger than 3/5. Now 2/3 or 3/4. Where am I going to put 2/3? On this side of 3/4 or on this side? Let's draw a picture as a strategy to help us with this one. So maybe I have 2 pizza pies here, and one's divided into 4ths, and 3 of them are shaded. One's divided into thirds. And 2 of them are shaded. Which one is greater? Hopefully you see 3/4, so I know 2/3 is going to be somewhere right here, and I know 3/5 is less than that, so that's going to be somewhere here. That's one way that I can use to order. I can draw a picture, I can create equivalent fractions. I want you to use any strategy that you would like, that makes the most sense to you. So continuing on with equivalent fractions, I want you to think of equivalent fractions that equal 1/2. Well, you know from that last assessment we took that 9/18 does. Also, you could do 6/12, 5/10, 4/8. I'm sure you can think of lots and lots and lots. If I have this, how could I go to 4/8? Well, 2 times 4 is 8, so 1 times 4 is going to give me that numerator, that 4. Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So 3/5. Let's multiply both of them by 2. And I can multiply it by 2/2, because 2/2 equals what? 1/2. And any number times 1 is going to be itself. So 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 2 is 10. If I wanted to do that by 2, that would be 12/20. These are all equivalent fractions. If I would draw pizza pies for them, they would all be the same amount shaded. Moving forward with fractions, you can find equivalent fractions. You can also simplify fractions. So instead of what we did before, where we're multiplying by a number to the top and bottom, this time we're going to try to divide both the top and number by a bottom. And whenever we get it as far down as it can go, simplified, that is going to be called lowest term. So when you answer problems for me in here, I want you to make sure that you always have it written in lowest terms. So what can you divide both 15 and 18 by? Oh, we can divide them both by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 18 divided by 3 is 6. That's an equivalent fraction, and that's the lowest term. Oh, right there. Lowest term. 6/12. Well, I automatically know that 6 is half of 12, so I can jump right down to say 1/2. Let's say up here that I would have first just divided them both by 2. Well, 6 divided by 2 would be 3. 12 divided by 2 would be 6. 3/6. What would you have to do then? You would have to recognize that you can divide both of those by 3. That would get you down to 1/2. So sometimes you might have to divide by more than one number if you don't pick the greatest common factor to begin with. Okay, let's do a couple more. 24 and 30, what can you divide both of those by? You might have said 2, because they're both even numbers. That's going to be 12/15. But what do you notice now? Both of those numbers can be divided by 3 to give you 4/5. Hopefully you see that I could have divided both of those by 6 to begin with. That would get me right there. So just always want to double check that we're writing our answers in lowest terms. 18/22. Those are both even numbers, so you can divide them both by 2. That would be 9/11. Is that simplified as far down as it can go, or can it be simplified more? Should be down as far as it can go. Now, I'm going to give you ones to try. I want you to order the following, then you're going to simplify, and then you're going to answer one question before you're finished for tonight that we're going to use in a class debate tomorrow. So if you can, pause the video now and work on ordering those, and then simplifying and answering that question, then you can play back through. All right, let's check and see how you did. Keep in mind my landmarks. I have a 0, I have 1, and I have a 1/2. That's going to help us start to plug some things in. 2/3, I know is greater than a 1/2. So I'm gonna shade that green, and I know it's going to be somewhere in this region. 4/5, I know that's greater than a 1/2. 1/6 is less than a 1/2. 8/16, well, 1/2 of 15 is 7 1/2. That's greater, so that's going to be greater. Okay. Well, I know 1/6 is going to be somewhere over here. Now I need to order the other ones. So, which strategy did you do? Did you try putting them in common denominators? If you did, you have a 3, a 5, and a 15, and I can easily see that the common denominator there is going to be 15. And that last fraction's already at a 15, so it's done for me. So 3 times what's 15? That's 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Times 3, that's going to be 12. And I have 8. So that should automatically tell me the order. I'm going to have 8/15, 10/15, and 12/15. But 10/15 and 12/15 weren't my original. It was 2/3 and 4/5. Simplifying the fractions. 45/90. Well, I can divide both of those by 9. That's going to give me 5/10. Oh, I know 5/10 is a half. Divide those both by 5. Or I could have seen at the beginning that 45 is half of 90. 6/8, I can divide both of those by 2. So that's going to be 3/4. Moving on then to the problem that I wanted you to think about. We are going to talk about this in class tomorrow. So I just want to make sure that when you do this, I need you to tell me which one is bigger, which fraction, 5/6 or 7/8. And think about, they're both missing just one whole. So was one bigger than the other, greater than the other, or are they equivalent? And make sure that you provide reasoning and justification for me.